Welcome back to my KEEPUP channel. Ministers back Farage after full Coutts dossier is revealed, cancelling of ex-Ukip leader's account branded sinister, and a disgrace after secret files show bank admitting he did meet commercial criteria but views were at odds with inclusivity. Ministers today rode in behind longtime foe Nigel Farage after a bombshell dossier laid bare the reasons he was cancelled by Coutts. The 40-page file shows that the bank cited his retweet of a Ricky Gervais joke and his friendship with Novak Djokovic to raise concerns he was xenophobic and racist. The extraordinary documents obtained by the former UKIP leader and handed to Mail Online revealed the 331-year-old bank decided to exit him after making reference to his friendship with former Wimbledon champion Djokovic. The tennis player, who lost in the men's singles final in SW19 on Sunday, made headlines over his decision not to have the COVID-19 vaccine during the pandemic. The dossier also shows the bank's discussions, considered 13 tweets, including a retweet by Mr. Farage of a video of a Ricky Gervais sketch posted by Lawrence Fox satirizing the transgender movement. In the scene, Gervais made a joke about old-fashioned women, the ones with wombs. Mr. Farage had retweeted the clip in May last year with the phrase "This is brilliant," but the document described it as a transphobic comedy sketch. The officials noted that closing his accounts could not be justified on the basis of his wealth, as his economic contribution was sufficient to retain on a commercial basis. But the minutes state, the committee did not think continuing to bank NF was compatible with Coutts, given his publicly stated views that were at odds with our position as an inclusive organization. Rishi Sunak vowed a crackdown on public figures being effectively punished for their political views after being repeatedly challenged to act by Tory MPs at PMQs this afternoon. And Tory ministers have lined up behind Mr. Farage against the bank, owned by NatWest, with Sala Braverman branding the situation sinister. Energy Secretary Grant Shapps, who has clashed bitterly with Mr. Farage before, said it was a disgrace. Labour MPs have also broken cover to voice disquiet. Among other swipes in the bank's hatchet job on Mr. Farage. His calls for the UK to leave the European Convention on Human Rights were listed as an example of adverse press. The dossier also raises concerns about Mr. Farage's backing for Donald Trump, saying he continues to support Trump despite the many new legal issues he faces. But it warns that using this as a basis for ending the banking relationship would be seen as taking sides on this debate. The assessment says Mr. Farage has been professional in his relations with the bank but adds of his public views, these remarks are distasteful and appear increasingly out of touch with wider society. At one point the dossier records that Mr. Farage is at best seen as xenophobic and pandering to racists, and at worst, he is seen as xenophobic and racist. He is considered by many to be a disingenuous grifter, it adds. The dossier also referred to accusations made by Labour MP Chris Bryant under parliamentary privilege that Mr. Farage was paid more than £500,000 by the Russian state, a claim he vehemently denies. Mr. Farage said, "This document is astonishing, it's abusive and it makes a whole series of wildly false statements about Russia while acknowledging I have not been convicted of anything." He disclosed last month that Coutts had informed him of its decision to close down his account, branding the move political persecution. Other customers who claimed to have been abandoned by lenders due to their political views also came forward. They included a priest who said his account was shut because he complained about his building society's messages during Pride Month. The BBC went on to report, citing people familiar with Coutts's move, that it was a commercial decision to shut Mr. Farage's accounts as they fell below the financial threshold required by the bank. The Coutts documents, which Mr. Farage obtained from the bank through a subject access request, details discussions by a Wealth Reputational Risk Committee on November 17 last year. They read, "The committee did not think continuing to bank NF, Nigel Farage, was compatible with Coutts given his publicly stated views that were at odds with our position as an inclusive organization. This was not a political decision but one centered around inclusivity and purpose." The dossier noted that there was no evidence of regulator or legal censure of Mr. Farage, that he was professional, polite and respectful to staff and that he had recently been downgraded from a higher-risk politically exposed person, PEP, to lower risk and was on the way to being classed as no risk at all. A Coutts spokesman said last night, "Our ability to respond is restricted by our obligations of client confidentiality. Decisions to close accounts are not taken lightly and take into account a number of factors including commercial viability, reputational considerations, and legal and regulatory requirements." As the client has previously confirmed, alternative banking arrangements have been offered within the wider group. At PMQs, former Cabinet Minister Jacob Rees-Mogg said, "Does the PM share my unease that a bank that has the government as its largest shareholder should close the account of a senior opposition politician? Will he use the government's shareholding to ensure that there is an inquiry into these circumstances?" Mr. Sunak replied, "It wouldn't be right if financial services were being denied to anyone exercising their right to lawful free speech. Our new Financial Services and Markets Act puts in place new measures to ensure that politically exposed persons are being treated in an appropriate and proportionate manner. Having consulted on the payment services regulations, we are in the process of cracking down on this practice by tightening the rules around account closures. But, in the meantime, any individual can complain to the Financial Ombudsman Service, which has the power to direct a bank to reopen their account." Another ex-minister, David Davis, used the Commons session to warn of thinly veiled political discrimination. He demanded banks produce a full list of all the accounts they had closed for non-commercial reasons. The dossier includes a lengthy piece of research apparently conducted for the bank on Mr. Farage's previous political positions and controversies. Given NF's high profile and the substantial amount of adverse press connected to him, there are significant reputational risks to the bank in being associated with him, it said. While it is accepted that no criminal convictions have resulted, commentary and behaviors that do not align to the bank's purpose and values have been demonstrated. In one section, the assessment warns that he is seen as xenophobic and racist and a disingenuous grifter. The values NF actively and publicly promotes/champions do not align with the bank's, the report said. Particularly given the manner in which he states and monetizes those views, deliberately using extreme, hateful, SP, and emotive language, often with a dose of misinformation. At best he is seen as xenophobic and pandering to racists, and at worst, he is seen as xenophobic and racist. He is considered by many to be a disingenuous grifter and is regularly, almost constantly, the subject of adverse media. Conversely, it's acknowledged that NF's commentary remains within the law regarding hate speech and arguably on the right side of glorifying or promoting harmful behavior, although we should be mindful of the role that illegal immigrant/invasion rhetoric plays in contributing to discrimination and in some instances, violence against migrants. The assessment also notes, it is likely that NF would perceive a decision to exit him as unfair and he would almost certainly use his public platform to communicate this dissatisfaction. Energy Security Secretary Grant Shapps said this morning that it would be disgraceful if Coutts had dropped Mr. Farage because his views do not align with its values. Mr. Shapps told Sky News, "I think it is absolutely disgraceful. I don't have to agree with everything Nigel Farage says to recognize that free speech is a very important part of our domestic life. What has happened with some of these banks through this regime, which is known as the PEP regime, or politically exposed people, is really actually scandalous. People shouldn't have their bank accounts closed because of their political or any other view. And banks shouldn't be refusing to open accounts on that basis as well. Yet there is a very long-running problem within this country where banks are misapplying the guidance and rules. And not just closing accounts, but refusing to open them in the first place, and that should not be the case." Source: dailymail.co.uk. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching.